Right, let's kick off now. We're a couple of minutes late. Apologies for that. I hope you're all well, and welcome to the Selectronic webinar. This is a little bit strange for people who know me. This is very unfamiliar type of territory for me to be presenting. So we thought we'd actually try and do it in a little bit of much as the usual way that we might do things. Today I'm joined by Ivan Carter. Ivan, are you 1.5 meters from me?
Of course we're 1.5 meters apart.
I don't think you are. Move over here.
Oh, well
Right.
moved.
Okay, cool. Now, you'll notice, of course, every normal sort of session always kicks off in the usual way. So the usual housekeeping that has to be considered. We need to tell you where the toilets are. Well, if you are here in SP Pro TV land, then you'd go out our boardroom doors, turn left, turn right, and then turn left. That probably means nothing to you, though. So probably for those who are working at home, probably just go to the kitchen, turn left or right, ask your wife, whatever. If you happen to hear a whoop, 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 whoop type sound, then I can't help you. You'd need to, again, probably ask your wife. For those who are on the job, you're probably finishing your second pie with Coke. So good on you, and thanks for joining us. I hope that this time slot does suit being a sort of a lunchtime-ish. We're trying to welcome some of our New Zealand guests as well today, where this time might suit you better. I hope you're all coping well with isolation. And let's get into this very, very exciting subject of Powerchain. What is Powerchain? Well, when the actual computer works, Powerchain is the linking of multiple SP Pro bidirectional inverters. So bringing together a number of battery-based inverters, the SP Pro. We are making an assumption today that most of you will be familiar with the SP Pro product. So we can use this linking of multiple inverters in a single-phase system, in a dual-phase system, or we can use it in a three-phase system. We don't really mind whether it's off-grid or on-grid. The same concepts are going to apply. I'll just pause myself there for a moment. If you do want to ask a question, please do it through the Q&A. Don't do it through the chat channel. We've got a lovely big screen in front of us where we'll see some questions. If they're relevant at the appropriate time that we're speaking, to answer there and then, we will. But if it's going to be something that will sort of upset the flow, then we'll just save it till later on. Judging by last night's webinar, we'll have plenty of time for questions and answers. So yeah, just put them up and we'll decide whether we answer them there and then, but through the Q&A only, thanks. It's a little bit strange. We've got this other screen and we've got John Wright, our marketing manager, who's almost being the producer of this little session, and he's putting questions in our face, and it's all very exciting. So what actually can we achieve with this Powerchain? So if we take the starting system being what we've got right now, being a three-phase system with some select suns for some managed AC coupled PV, we can now add another set of SP Pros to give us 120, and another set of SP Pros to give us 180, and then another set again of SP Pros. So we can have 4 SP Pro inverters per phase, whereas previously we were limited to just the one. Now we've got 4. And it also means now we can start to add some more of these select sun inverters to be increasing the PV capacity in these systems, right up to 480 kilowatts of managed PV. So we're really sort of taking what is, I think, Australia's most loved storage inverter and just giving you more and more. So 240 kilowatts continuous and 480 kilowatts of managed PV. If we were to do that on a single phase situation with some Fronius inverters, we still have the same basic design rules, 5 S-cert inverters on a phase and 4 SP Pros. If we were doing it with the Fronius, we've got up to 18 kilowatts at 24 volt systems with 36 kilowatts. So that 36 kilowatts of managed PV would come from having 5 of the 8.2 Fronius S-cert. So that's the largest single phase inverter that we do as an S-cert. 5 of those gives us 36 kilowatts. Up to 30 kilowatts using 48 volt systems, because we could have up to 4 of our 7.5s, giving us 30 kilowatts, and then up to 41 kilowatts, because we have a ratio, as we've always had, a 2-to-1 ratio between the total SP Pro output and the output, AC output from the Fronius. We don't care about the PV input to the furnace, it's the AC output that we're concerned about. And then if we're doing a 120 volt system, we can have up to 80 kilowatts on a single phase using 4 of the 20 kilowatt SP Pros, and it's still up to 41 kilowatts of managed PV, just like the 48 volt, because we've got that 5 times 8.2. The other option that we have using the single phase systems is using the ABB Selectronic certified inverters, and using those, still going to be the same capacity of 24 volt for the SP Pros, but 30 kilowatts would be the maximum there. 5 of the 6 kilowatt ABBs, up to the same 30 kilowatts on a 48 volt system, and 30 kilowatts of managed PV, and with the 120 again, 80 kilowatts of SP Pros with still that 30 kilowatts, simply because we've got five S certs that we can have, and 6 kilowatts is the largest ABB inverter. Okay, what about if we're doing it with a dual phase system? And this is where we start to see the flexibility of these systems, pardon me, where we could actually have ABBs on one phase and we can have the Fronius inverters on the other phase. So we start to see some really nice flexibility where we're using up to 4 SP Pros on each phase, and again up to 5 single phase on each phase, but they can be different. They'll be communicated from a different on a different phase, but we'll go into a little bit more detail on that later on.
Questions just come in, Lindsay. You've been talking about AC coupled for DC. What about DC coupled? DC coupled works as well, does it?
Absolutely. Josh, you're not allowed to ask that question yet. We're going to get to that, but yes, you can use DC coupled in these systems as well. We'll cover that in a little bit more detail later, but absolutely, no problem. So all the rules that you know of, basically they still apply, they've just got bigger. Thanks for that question, Josh. Hope you're well on Kangaroo Island. And then looking at the 3-phase flexibility, 4 inverters per phase, and we can have a nice mix and match of, again, Fronius, Simo, Asserts, and Select Sun. So it's giving us the ability. Select Sun does have that potential limitation of a single MPPT, but if you want the pure grunt of the 40 kilowatt Select Sun, but you need a bit more of the flexibility of the Fronius with the dual MPPTs, then you've got the ability to mix and match. You can't have some of each on each phase, all Fronius on one phase or all Select Sun, but you have that ability between phases to mix and match. We're going to be using a common battery bank on these systems. So each inverter will connect to the same DC bus, and that allows energy to be shared between phases as well in a multiple phase system. So whilst one phase might be charging, the other phase could be discharging the battery. Unbalanced on the SP Pros, we don't really care. It doesn't bother us too much there at all.
So another question's come in, Lindsay, where we are asking if we've got 4 SP Pros on a phase, can we have 5 SP Pros per each inverter on that phase? No,
as per the previous slides. So if it's a single phase, and we'll go into a bit more detail on this, but if we just go back a couple of slides there, and thanks for the question. That was Pedro, was it? Glad to see you're awake already, Pedro, over in WA. It's nice and early, good to see. So we've got the communications line you're seeing there coming just from the first and SP Pro there. So it's a total per phase, 5 S-certs per phase. Thanks for your question, Pedro. So a common battery bank allows that flexibility of energy moving in between phases. That's the key to this. This has been a reasonably big project for us, and it's been a good 18 months or so in the making. We just wanted to share with you for a moment the extensive testing that's gone into this product. This is not something that we finished just last week, and we're putting it out into the marketplace now. That would be irresponsible engineering, and we certainly haven't done that. We've had a number of sites, and what Selectronic always do is product always goes to our own field test sites first. That is myself, Ivan, the bosses here, IT managers, production managers, our tech support guys. We all have systems, and that's where we do our testing after the lab. Then they go out to these what we call pre-release sites. So I thought I'd show you 3 of those. The first one here being Orpheus Island, up off Queensland there, where we have 9 20 kilowatt inverters with 40 kilowatt Select Sun, so a total of 360 kilowatts of PV. That was installed March 2019, quite a while ago. And whilst there's a couple of things we would prefer to just maybe change a little bit on how those Select Suns have been laid out. This is the basic layout of the inverters and the cabling that's sitting in behind all of that. And that system has been operating since March 2019, and it's helped us find a couple of bugs and bits and pieces, absolutely, but has been actually operating the resort since that date. And thanks to our friends at Platypus Power for allowing us to show that system. Another system that was installed in December of last year, then Monjuro Station, which is a single-phase system with 3 7.5 kilowatt SP Pros and 3 Franius 8.2s. And that was installed last year in a shipping container situation. And that has been operating pretty well as well. You can see the other side there, the 3 Franius, the 3 SP Pros, and the batteries are in the distance. What this particular guy did, Adam Wilson up at Tropical Energy Solutions, he basically split the container in half so that he had all his wiring on the other half, and the heat generation is on the half that you're looking at. So that meant his air conditioning loads were a little bit smaller as well. So quite a good way to approach it. And in this picture here, you can see a closer view of the batteries. Now, I'm not sure, we've got somebody's raised their hand. That's Mark from Alice Springs. Not quite sure. What do we do with that, Ivan?
I don't know. That would be up to our
producer. What's the producer say we do with a raised hand? Is there a question that you wanted to ask? Mark, if you can put it into the Q&A, that would be wonderful, and then we can see it and answer it appropriately, as we would, of course.
Yeah. So there is, while we're sitting there, there's a question up here. Do we only use a common battery bank? And yes, the common battery bank is used across all of the systems, and that allows across multiple phase systems the energy that's being generated by the PV to be shared across all phases through that common connection.
Thanks for that, Ivan. And I'm enjoying feeling a bit of love here. Mark is saying hello. Great to hear from you, Mark, in Alice. Hope things are well in your isolated world up there. And Carl has given me a high five. I think that's what you're saying, Carl. So thank you very much for that. That's great to hear. I know you're probably all thinking I look a little bit taller on these webinars than normal, but let's just keep the short jokes aside. Our friends Peter King as well, up at Select Solar. I think it's Select. I can't quite see the logo down there properly.
Select Solar, yes.
Thank you, Ivan.
Or Select Energy.
Select Energy, apologies. Badara Island was done just earlier this year, and that had 620 kilowatt SP Pros. I know Josh is on here, who was instrumental also in the installation of that, and also 2 40 kilowatt Select Suns and 3 of the 20s, and pretty impressive installation. This one with lots of nice cable trays. There's your SP Pros in there, and another view there showing you the Select Sun inverters. If anybody's keen on understanding a little bit of background about the trip that Josh Shepherd, one of the installers, took on that, it's quite an interesting trip because he lives on Kangaroo Island, and Badara Island is nowhere near Kangaroo Island. They should make a movie out of that, actually. I think it's quite an interesting read, but Josh's Facebook might show you that story. And I really like this one, and this is, I guess, just a selfie of the installers. Why do we care about a selfie of the 3 happy installers? They're obviously pretty happy, and one of the installers there is wearing a Selectronic cap, so that's it. They have to be shown. So thanks for that. That's much appreciated. All right, so let's have a look then at a bit of the circuit description, how the systems work, and what you might not need. So I'll hand over to Ivan to start to take you through that part of the topic.
Yeah. All right, so one of the key things that we need to understand with these systems is when you put multiple SP Pros on a phase, how does it work? What does it do? Now, the key thing here is that each SP Pro evenly shares the load or the charge power. So if you have a 4 kilowatt load and we've got 2 SP Pros on a phase, then that load is evenly shared by both SP Pros. You'll find that they will each run half of that power. And conversely, if they were charging away if the system was charging away at 15 kilowatts, then both of them are going to be doing 7.5 kilowatts. Why is that important? The reason it's important is that it's those times where if you had a system which one inverter came up to power, and then when it hit its limit, the next one came online, you start to see variations and flicker and so on through the system as they transition. Because they're all working evenly at the same time, this way you can have the surges in power and you won't see any variation in the output voltage or through any of those transitions and changes. So that's a key thing with the way the system works, is that they evenly share all the time. So the next thing about it we need to know is, how do we start designing this system? So with the SP Pro Powerchain system, if you're working with the 482 units, which have 7.5 continuous kilowatts of output power, and you add another one, you then get 15 kilowatts continuous output power. The powers are summed together, so you add them and they add together as well. Same with the charge currents. If we've got the capability of charging at that rate, you add another one and you double that capacity for charging. So it really is, the two are combining to form one bigger unit in all ways. And that flows through to our short-term output powers as well. That output power for short-term, for starting motors and things, again, it's all added together. So you're truly getting, when you add another SP Pro to a single system, you're truly getting double the capacity of that system. What you do have to remember though, because of the way it works, all SP Pros have to be the same model. The system only works properly if you add the same model with the same model. So you must, if you have 482s there at the moment and you're adding another one, you have to add another 482. You can't think, oh, I only need another couple of kilowatts, so I'll put the 480 on there as well. No, you have to add another 482. The system works perfectly with either DC coupling or AC coupling. I think we've covered that fairly well through the diagrams that Lindsay all went through. Regardless, DC and AC coupling, just in the same way that a single inverter did, the Powerchain doesn't impact any of that at all.
While you're there, Ivan, we've got a question from Daniel, and thanks for your question, Daniel, about how do we manage the charging algorithm when we have AC and DC. Do you want to just briefly touch on that? Is there a document that tells us how to do that, or can we run through that?
Absolutely. So thanks for the question, Daniel. The algorithm works in exactly the same way it did with the single phase systems, where the DC charge controller is set and matched to the same as the SP Pro. That way they work in harmony. None of that changes.
Just might take a couple of those questions while we're on that roll, just so we don't lose some of those. A nice loaded question from Justin Scaines of BAE Batteries. I can see you smiling now that I'm saying that, Justin. What batteries were used in the Monjuro station? They were Gen Z lithium batteries. The batteries used on the Orpheus Island and the Badara Island were BAE. That I think, Justin, I think you sell those. So maybe a loaded question. Nicely done, though. I like your work. All right. Thanks, Ivan, if you can keep heading on.
Yep, no worries. And as was highlighted before, it all does need to be on a common battery bank. And that way, all of the system works and is charging so that we can keep track of the state of charge properly. But also for multi-phase systems, we can make sure that we can actually share that energy between phases. And yes, there is a question saying that it works only with the 2i series. You can see there that it is suitable for any of the Series 2 SP Pros, as long as it has the advanced comms card fitted. If it doesn't have that, that can be put in. But the Series 2i has that as standard equipment. So yes, it works with the 2i, but also any Series 2 with the advanced comms card fitted. The system, whilst we have been very proud and worked very hard to make sure everything is backward compatible, we do have to draw a line somewhere, and it isn't suitable for any Series 1 inverters. With this system, we have dropped compatibility with COCO as well. So if you do have COCO inverters on your system, you'll need to either change those or leave it is. And same with Series 1. If you want to go further forward, you will need to replace those units.
Before we go on to the next page, we might just answer a couple of those questions just because I'm concerned we might lose them. Pedro's asking, we're looking for a much larger single-phase inverter, PV inverter. Not particularly at the moment. Generally, if we get into those bigger PV sizes beyond what we can handle now, we are going to a three-phase system. So not in particular. I think we've answered the one Pedro's asking about, only works for 2i series. No, that's not the case, as Ivan just outlined. James Heal, hope you're well, James, up in Mackay, asking about the master working between multiple sets of SP Pro. I think we'll cover that a little bit later on, that one.
Yeah, we'll cover that later on, James.
And Josh is asking the question that because he had, I think, 4 batteries in parallel up at Badara Island, about the ability to monitor multiple strings of battery from a temperature and a midpoint. Would you like to answer that from a technical point of view, please, Ive?
Yeah, so with these systems, we only still allow the monitoring of a single point, but in these larger systems, often part of the installation is really to ensure that the current balance is equal between all of them. It's just like when you're putting a smaller lithium-ion system, which is a stack of parallel batteries. It's really important just to make sure that all the current sharing is working properly through that. So it's a good part of commissioning practice to make sure that that's all working. But at the moment, there's only one midpoint sensor for the system.
And while we were talking about DC coupling, may as well answer Ganesh's question there. Hope you're well, Ganesh. Managed DC MPPT? No, it's not managed. That's still as it's always been. So no management of DC coupled as yet.
Yep. So what else do I need to consider when I'm putting in one of these systems? Each SP Pro has to be interconnected via our built-in sync system, which is a simple cabling connection, which I'll go through in more detail in a few moments. Clearly, you must be running the version of software that supports Powerchain, which is version 14. For monitoring, one Select Live is required for the whole system. So because the system is centrally managed, only one Select Live is required from a single or from a system which might have 2 SP Pros to our larger system. Only the one Select Live is required for all of the monitoring. One of the other requirements is that you may need an external contactor, and that may be because of the power requirements from the AC source, or there are some specific system requirements that mean you must put an external contactor in. And the next few slides will go through all of the variations and what you need to know there. With Powerchain, we've introduced some new words. So they're quite different and new terminology from the prior advanced multi-phase system. You can see in the top left, we have our system manager. Its role is to look after the whole system, as well as produce its own power and export and do all of the things that the SP Pro normally does. So the system manager is the one that you connect the Select Live to for the full monitoring. It is also the one that you would connect your laptop to do all of the configuration of all of the system. Everything is all connected and configured from the one system manager. You'll see we then move on to what we have called a phase managers. So they're the next units. If you're in a multi-phase system, you will have a phase manager on each of the other phases. All of the additional inverters on each phase, they're all called workers, and you'll see those terms through the new version of SP-Link, we'll be talking about phase managers, system managers and workers, and how we assign and define what each SP Pro's role is in the system. And we'll cover that a little bit further, but it's important to have that new terminology sorted. We're now talking, now you'll see this slide here. This is a really key slide. We've previously seen on single phase systems, power comes into our AC source, feeds out through to the AC load and then through to the house. So where do you wire the system when you're adding in another worker? It is only connected through its AC load terminals. The AC load terminals are bidirectional, so as well as being able to pour energy out that path to feed the house or export as required, it can also draw the energy in through those terminals to push into the battery bank. So all its energy for the worker goes in and out those load terminals. So when would we need the external contactor? So because that worker is drawing its power through those terminals, if you're using the AC source, all its current is coming through the worker's internal contactor. So just like in previously, if we were drawing more than the internal contactor could supply, we'd then need an external contactor. So in the case here, if they were 7.5 kilowatt SP Pro 482s, we wouldn't need an external contactor if the maximum load didn't exceed the 63 amps. But with our SPLC 1202s, that the two of them pulling from the grid would exceed the manager's internal contactor, so we would require external contactor in that case. If we move on to the next slide, you can see here, this is how it would be wired if we, in the case where it did exceed the manager's internal contactor. You will note that we've got our normal external contactor arrangement, and then all of the manager and all of the workers connect in via the AC load terminals. It might be worth noting that, you know, it's not a limitation of how many you've got. It's not 3 or 4, because if they were, say, 480s, which can't draw, which are only the 3.5 kilowatts, they're not going to exceed the internal contactor rating. Moving on to a 3-phase system, as with our original 3-phase implementation under the AMP scheme, the external...
Hang on. Well, AMP, they're an insurance company?
Advanced multi-phase is the original system.
Right.
Sorry, that's a term I've just assumed everyone knows. External contactor is not required unless it exceeds the rating of the internal contactor. No change there. The change, however, comes in regardless when we add workers, so the extra units that you can see on your screen to the right. With a multi-phase system, as soon as you add workers to the system, you must use an external contactor, regardless of whether the power would not overload the internal contactor of the managers. It is a requirement of the Powerchain system. So any multi-phase system with workers, you must fit an external contactor.
I think perhaps what we've just outlined there, that probably covers off a couple of the questions that we've got there. From James, the master working between multiple sets of SP Pros when charging in a certain charging mode.
Yep, so essentially they all work in the same way. They're all working at the same time, charging as we go.
The next comment, which is again from Justin Scaines, we'll just ignore that and put that in spam. I don't know what you're talking about there, Justin. That's silly. Steve Newton's asking about the comms. Steve, I think we'll just cover that coming up in when we talk about the communication side of things, if we may.
Yep. So now what we're looking at here now is the diagrams that come out of our manuals, which show some detailed wiring on the AC side. One of the critical things to note on this wiring schematic is the fact that the active and the neutral conductors follow the same path. You can see them drawn that way from the load side, from the system manager and the workers back to where they common up to the load connection point. It's critical that they all work, all run in the same way. So pay careful attention to that. From a DC wiring point of view, it works in exactly the same way. All of the batteries, all of the heavy battery connections must obviously connect through to all of the units through a common point. It doesn't, because we have the communication system through all of the inverters, whilst it's good practice to ensure all of your cabling is of a similar length to where it commons up onto before heading to the battery, it's not a particular requirement. And it's that communication system between each inverter which allows them all to share and work equally. It's not dependent on the cable lengths to the common point. Obviously, feeding from that common point out to your battery, if you do have multiple batteries, that's where it's really important to ensure that all of the cable lengths are the same and all of your batteries are working at the same rate. From the sync interconnections, which I talked about earlier, it's a daisy chain arrangement. So it starts at the first unit and daisy chains through all of the SP Pros to the last one. And as the picture shows, you have a termination connector at the first one and at the end one, and then it daisy chains through. So coming to Stephen's question about for mission critical systems, if there is an interruption in the interconnect, the system, depending on where that interconnection breakdown is, will either continue to operate, and let me give you some for examples. If the interconnection is broken such that workers can no longer be seen by the system manager, then the system manager detects that that's dropped offline. The worker will drop offline because it's no longer in communication, and the manager will reduce the capacity of the system down to accommodate those workers being not there. The system will continue to run, and once the communication link is re-established, the worker will come back up online as long as there's a grid to sync to, but it can recover automatically. In the case where one of the managers does drop offline, then that does cause the whole system to turn off. The reason it needs to turn off there is if we're not communicating with the manager, we can't convey accurate phase information across to the other two phases. And you could imagine the chaos that would cause if you've got pumps, three-phase pumps and so on running, and all of a sudden you've got phase angles between the voltage sources going in all sorts of directions. So if a manager does drop offline, the whole system does have to come down.
Thank you, Ivan. Just answering another couple of questions in between there. Bruce Nelson, g'day from New Zealand there, Bruce. Do we get a copy of the presentation? Yes, we'll be sending a recording out. I think, is that what Central Command is telling us? We'll be sending the whole recording or the presentations. Not sure if Central Command's listening, but that'll be production back in the other studio. But yeah, there'll be some communication on this presentation back to you there, Bruce. Can multiple battery banks be monitored? I think we did talk about that before, but do you want to answer that one, Ivan?
Yeah, so again, with the multiple battery banks, we're only monitoring one battery bank. So we have only got that ability. So it's really important to ensure that through the commissioning and the ongoing, annual or 6 monthly maintenance, whatever is appropriate, that battery bank, all the batteries be checked and verified.
And a good question there from Ganesh about can we find the point of failure through Select Live?
Well, so from Ganesh, thank you. So the Select Live will report any faults and things just as it does at the moment. And with the pass-through capability using Select Live as a gateway, SP Link, of course, can connect in, and you can connect to whichever inverter you need to identify where the problems may arise from. So all of the SP Link connections work through Select Live and allow you to do full diagnosis of the system, just as if you were sitting in front of it, no problem at all.
I take over me, do I? I think that's what we practiced.
I think that's what we practiced.
We're just trying to get our act together here. One of the things that really we tried hard to do from about 3 years ago, we started to say that we really need to make sure that the SP Pro product gets simpler to use. That was very, very important for us. We had a lot of feedback saying, oh, yeah, they're a great product, but they do so much, they're a little bit hard to use. So we started to generate this product called the Site Configuration Wizard. To me, the exciting thing, and I'm no rocket scientist, but it's really no harder to configure a system with one inverter or with the full complement of 12 SP Pros. It's still using the same wizard because all you're doing is you are talking to the system manager. You push the configuration into that system manager, which is using the wizard, and that will then push the configuration to all of the other inverters in the system. So it's really very much the same as of a single inverter. The only thing that would be different is where you've got multiple inverters, you will actually have to assign them. So the graphic you see on the right-hand side of your screen there, that is just showing where we have to actually assign the function or the activity of each inverter. And there's a cute little way that they've got of that being really easy on site as well. So you're not going to be sort of sitting there having to connect to one inverter, to two inverters, to three inverters, etc. It's all still done through the one inverter. So it's a single point of configuration, which really does make things very, very tidy indeed. Can't remember whether we're back to you. I think I've mucked that up, haven't I?
Possibly. I'm sure everyone will forgive us. The attendees are still high, so I think we're all good.
They're all still awake, so that's a good thing. Yeah, probably into the third pine sauce, Coke by now. Yeah.
I'm looking forward to my lunch, that's for sure.
Yeah, that'd be good, yeah. All right, back to you.
So, and of course, with all of our things, all of those details that I've gone through are all in the installation guide, and that talks you through everything that I've shown you today, and that's available to download on our website on that rather complicated looking web link. Just go to our website, get on the support under the support page, and you'll find it there. I wouldn't try and copy that one down.
When they get the presentation, maybe they can click on it. Maybe
that could work too.
Just go to www.selectronic and go to the support tab and look for IN57.
That sounds like a plan to me.
Yeah. I'll just answer Glenn's question there. Again, thanks, Glenn, and good day to the West. Can we get through Western Power with multiple inverters? Well, the same will apply with what we've spoken about to Western Australia. So those in Western Australia, they have an inverter capacity. In fact, other utilities also have an inverter capacity. They don't care whether you're exporting or what you're doing, it's what's the maximum inverter capacity. But we do have an ability to effectively make the system look like a smaller system. So for instance, they might say 10 kilowatts inverter capacity is the total, but you can't put any more. So you couldn't have a 7.5 kilowatt SP Pro and an 8.2 kilowatt Fronius. That exceeds their 10 kilowatts. But through a setting called total AC support limit, we can set that to the given or the approved inverter capacity of, in this case, 10 kilowatts. And that will then restrict the impact onto the grid to 10 kilowatts. So for example, if we were having that example of 7.5 and an 8.2 Fronius, and the sun was shining nice and strongly, and we have 8.2 kilowatts coming out of the Fronius, we will then only allow 1.8 kilowatts to come from the battery. So the 1.8 from the battery and the 8.2 from the Fronius, there's our 10 kilowatts. If the sun has gone in, and there is no PV, then we would allow simply 10 kilowatts from the battery. So with the Powerchain, nothing changes in that way. Basically the same that we've been able to get through Western Power already, and we have been successful with that, and they're not the only utility now starting to ask for this. We just haven't got that total AC support tried through South Australia yet. We are doing that at the moment, but we certainly have had success with it in WA. So this Powerchain will work in exactly the same way. We'll have more inverters, but we can still restrict it down to the inverter capacity requirement by the utility. So this is where I'm supposed to step back in, isn't it?
Let's just wing it.
Smooth as a baby's bottom. So we've been talking a lot about big systems, but it's not just the big systems where Powerchain does really show some great benefits. It could be a typical system, and we get this talk at this phone call quite a lot. The system is starting to just not be quite what it used to be, because a good system, what we've seen over the years, and what's that now, 39 years of doing inverters, that we found that a good system will keep growing because it works so well. So you guys, you design a good system, people just keep plugging things into it. Hey, great, the system's still going. They keep plugging in, they keep plugging in. I know my own system at home. I started off using some ridiculously small amount of power 26 years ago, and now I use about 5 times that. But it just keeps growing, and when that can happen, it can put stress on a lot of the componentry. The batteries could be getting stressed. The generator, of course, is the typical complaint. Oh, the generator's running much more. And it may also be then, right, we need to put more PV on. Fine, okay. And the batteries are being stressed as we suggested. So what could be the answer to that? Well, we could put some DC coupled PV in there. But if the customer is saying, no, I want to use some of the flash new lithiums, and it's a managed lithium, in other words, we're going to be needing communication. So it could be the BYD batteries, Pylon Tech, Sonashine Lithium at Home, LG Chems, those sort of batteries that need comms, then unfortunately that's not supported for DC coupling, but it is supported for AC coupling. So the nice answer to that is we're now going to add that second SP Pro as a worker into that single phase system, and that's going to allow us to be able to put more managed PV on as well. So adding that gives us the ability that if we do need to upgrade the batteries, we're going to be able to charge the batteries faster because we've got now twice the charging capacity from the generator, and by increasing the PV, we've also got more charging capacity with the PV as well. So we really are able to, without throwing out hardware, and it's something that I'd have to say is really a concern to me personally at the moment, how much hardware is just going to go out of date in this new world and be thrown out. I think that's really poor, and it's something that we've worked very hard on. Let's keep the existing hardware, let's just add on to it. So as long as it's a Series 2, the worst you might have to do here is just, if it's an older Series 2, is to add the new a new comms card to it, an advanced comms card, and then you're ready to go. As we did touch on before, because we're using the style of communication system that we only need to have one Select Live to connect to this system. So it will connect to the system manager, just the one Select Live. And now, thanks to that release that we put out earlier this year, where as long as we've got Select Live installed, we can now also get connectivity through SP Link. So Select Live is intended for the end user, not for you. And SP Link is what you would use for doing any configuration of the system, making a change to a setting, doing a download, just keeping an eye on the system, maybe to do a maintenance report. That's what you would use SP Link from. So effectively, for those who might not be aware, we're using the Select Live as like a gateway, a communications gateway. Anywhere that you've got internet on your computer with SP Link, then you can connect to that system. So let's start to have a bit of a summary of what we're able to achieve now with this new Powerchain release, with the systems of up to 240 kilowatts of continuous power. And we've underlined the continuous power there because we do want to make the point that I think in this market space, Selectronic are still the only company that uses continuous. And continuous meaning 24/7, 25 degrees ambient at unity power factor. Everybody else that we know is using the half-hour rating. So this is our continuous rating. So obviously we can provide significantly more than just 240 kilowatts of battery power. as we showed you before, up to 480 kilowatts of managed PV using Select Sun inverters, the 40 kilowatt Select Suns. We're able to expand any existing system as long as it's a Series 2, as we said, at the worst. We're just going to have to add a comms card to that. We think it's really very, very easy to install. It's something that we've worked hard on, and I think for the a couple of guys that have already seen the install, most of those have been overseen by Ivan, so he's done the actual real nitty-gritty himself. But when you stop and look at it, it's just the same as what you know and love already, or hopefully know and love already. And the fact that everything's done through a single point configuration does really make it a lot easier. We recognise we're probably the last in the market space in this with this technology, but that's allowed us to look at the problems that we think others have had or shortfalls that others have had, and then perhaps address those. So effectively, Powerchain is built into every SP Pro Series 2i. So if you're buying a new inverter now, you don't have to be buying anything extra. It's all there inside the box. The only consideration may have to be, do I or don't I need an external contactor? But that's been the same case all along with any SP Pros. So when we're trying to make everything available in the box, you don't buy it and then have to buy this and that. I was looking through one of our suppliers' price list today, and they have a competitor's product on there, and I couldn't believe the list of options that they had. It was, you buy the inverter, but then you buy this box, and you buy that. There's about 6 extra boxes to do what we do as standard out of the boxes. I'm not going to mention brand names. You know that's not my style. Well, face-to-face it might be, but not on this format. I don't think we need to be doing that.
Come on, we're face-to-face.
Well,
no, I leave 1.5 metres apart.
Yeah, 1.5 metres. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So, all right. So we thought we'd open it up now. We've got 10 or so minutes left to answer some more questions. And Dean Wallace is asking us, how far off is a Quick View app for mobile? So your question there, I guess, is an app versus a portal. Is that what you're asking there, Dean? If you're able to answer that question, quickly answer whether that's what you're meaning. Yes, okay. So at this stage, no particular plan to do it as an app. What we do see a need to do is to make it as a local connectivity so that we don't have to have internet. So if customers don't have internet, they can still see their on a device of some description. But no particular desire to do an app at the moment. But if there's something that you think that's really missing because we don't have that, I guess obviously sizing onto a screen is certainly the obvious thing. But Select Live is certainly getting a good look at it at the moment to say, right, what's the next version of that? We have a product roadmap committee here, which Ivan and I are half of that committee, and we drive those sorts of things into our director. What do they call it? Board of what do we call that? Board of something.
Board of directors?
No, that doesn't sound right. Yeah, management team. That's the word. Thank you, Ivan. Yeah, and then decisions get made. Remote start for generator has been asked of me. Now, that's a really, really interesting one, and that's one that will actually probably cause a fight internally anyway, because one of the problems we get is when customers have control of generators, and it's really problematic because often we get the question, the generator keeps starting, and there's no reason for it. There is always a reason that the SP Pro starts the generator, always, without doubt, and it's a good reason. And that often might be because the batteries need to be equalised, and so it's made a decision to take action and equalise the batteries for the sake of the batteries. If the customer then intervenes and turns that off, we've got a problem. So the SP Pro says, next day, I'm going to try that again. I'm going to keep doing that until I achieve what I've been told. And so the ability to turn that on and off via an app, I think it's questionable. We're certainly happy to have a robust discussion about that, but I see it as a little bit problematic. Don's asking, is Powerchain available if the original inverter is an SP Pro Go unit? I don't see why it wouldn't be available, Ivan, given that it's the same unit, just with a modified software of export limits. I don't see why it wouldn't be. Is there anything you need to add to that, Ivan?
No, Powerchain will be able to work with the Go series. Obviously, the export limitation that's pre-configured into the Go unit will remain the same.
Thank you, Ivan. Anonymous attendee is asking what happens if a worker SP Pro fails in a system. Well, we did cover that before. Do you want to just give a quick summary on that again, Ivan?
So, quick one on that. If a worker drops offline, the system continues operating as normal, but obviously with the reduced capacity. So the system manager knows that that's gone from the system, so it automatically reduces the system down to work without that worker in place.
Thank you, Ivan. James Hill from Mackay is asking us about basically can we work with generic? So yes, we can. Anything you can really do with the system now, or the system as you know it, yes, we can still work with generic. Of course, you will get the limitations of what generic AC coupling gives us, but in those commercial sites, yes, certainly you can. We will be having the ability to upgrade inverters. That will be at this stage having to come back to us, but if it's Fronius inverters, we will have that ability. But yep, you can certainly do it in generic. Now, Josh Shepherd, you might want to answer that one because he says he's only got the one problem, but I know better, Josh. I've seen the website. But, can you answer that one there, mate?
Yeah, so the question is monitoring multiple strings of batteries. So I think that, again, the system is only set up to monitor one string of batteries. I think what would be better there is, Josh, we'll take that one offline and we can work through that, and then those answers can be published to everyone here today, because it's a little more complicated than just looking forward on that one.
But what about his last comment? Josh, that's really important. Josh is the installer on the Badara, one of the installers on the Badara Island project that we showed you, and his last comment there is, can attest to the installation of Powerchain was great to install and very simple. So that's from somebody who's actually been on the tools and got it done. So that's great. So we've still got a couple of minutes left. If anyone wants to ask any more questions, there's been some great questions along the way today, a lot more than we had yesterday, which is really good. We hope we've been able to answer those for you. But is there any other questions we can touch on? We feel free to ask a question about anything. Doesn't have to be Powerchain, but while we've got 5 minutes of your attention, we can answer anything that you might like. It's all very quiet. They must be eating their. Our configuration files easy to load, asks Carl. Just exactly as you do with a single power SP Pro now. You create it in the wizard and push it into the system manager. Done. Am I overplaying that a little bit, Ivan?
No. It is a surprising thing, and if there was some feedback from the original sites that I put through when we had done all of our system checks, and I went, right, yep, that's all good. I just hit configure, and on a couple of feedbacks have been, yeah, wow, oh, that's it. And I went, yeah, that's it. It's just all in the one system. So I think the key message we're trying to get across here with Powerchain, it's no different to what you've been doing before. It's connect with SP-Link, configure the system, and you're done. It really is that easy. It is linking all of those units into one, so it's still, and the whole collection of inverters is treated as one Powerchain system.
So I guess you can take that as a bit of gospel, because for those who don't know Ivan, he's not in sales. He is in the technical side. He's our technical manager. So I guess if it comes with me as a salesman, you'd probably take it with a grain of salt. But coming from somebody with a bit more technical pedigree, then you can take that pretty well as gospel. Josh Shepp is asking the question about the Power Plus lithium batteries, which have been fairly popular with our product. Will they be added to our wizard? Yes, they will. They're ready for, I think, next month's release in June of SP-Link, and they will be added to that. So it would be a supported battery, not a managed battery. So the difference between a supported battery and a managed battery, basically a managed battery has communications, the CAN button between the battery and inverter, such as BYD's LG Chems, where settings are dynamically changed as the battery makes those decisions, whereas a supported battery is one that doesn't have that communications, but Selectronic and the battery supplier, such as Gen Z, for instance, is an example that we've got there now, where it's like a lead acid battery, if you like. It's a static sort of settings, but those settings have been worked out and agreed to between both parties, and we'll also be able to then say what the minimum number of batteries are that you need. So you'll find that when you guys ring us up, we're often just jumping into the wizard, the easy start guide, and we're just going through that every time you ask us a question, because it tells you how many batteries, or it tells you of any problems you might have in the system. So please make yourself familiar with just using the wizard as a little bit of a design tool. It's really quite helpful. What else we got there, Ive?
Okay, so there's another question that's come in, not related to Powerchain, but it is something that does come up a little bit. Have you had any issues with 2i inverters, and whether it's 2i Series 2 or Series 1, it all applies, incorrectly reading lead acid state of charge? So the answer is fairly straightforward, no. However, it's all about the initial setup and whether and how the power and everything is managed. So because with the lead acid battery, and all inverters have been doing this for a long time, we're tracking the energy in and out of the battery. So we're reliant on the battery going to a full state of full charge, and that's what sets our state of charge calculation back to 100%. Depending on how the battery is used, that may drift over time, but we have found that with systems that are regularly going back to fully charged, that resets the state of charge and comes back in. So in terms of inaccuracies, one of the largest areas of problem we've had is with the shunts, and where people are using DC coupling and they haven't quite got the shunt right, or there's drift in the shunt and those sorts of things, and that can lead to inaccuracies in the state of charge. But no, in terms of the product itself, when set up and running correctly, no problem at all.
If you've got a particular site problem there, Dean, perhaps we could just send some details through to our support, creating a ticket on our website, and we can maybe help you through that one in particular if there's something that you've got a problem with. Normally it is just perhaps the size of the battery that's been put in, or it's not getting to a fully charged situation properly. If it's a BAE battery, Justin Scones, who's on here, he would be able to tell you exactly how you know when you've got your batteries fully charged. He's very well versed in that. You've already sent a ticket through. Now, can you just delete that? That's not right. Well, we better have a look at that then, Dean. Fair call. You'll get on that straight away, won't we, Ive? We will. Why can't we have more than 5 managed AC coupled inverters in a power chain? Well, we can have. We've only got 5 addresses that we're able to actually use. Is there a more technical way of explaining that, Ivan?
Yeah, so just to follow up there, so the 5 managed AC coupled inverters in a power chain configuration, that's per manager. So on a single phase system, you're quite right, there would only be able to have 5. But if you're on a multiple phase system, you can have 5 per manager. So in a 3-phase configuration, you could actually have 15 managed AC coupled inverters in the power chain configuration. Coming back to the limit of 5, it's all about how fast we can get through and talk to all of those inverters. The more inverters out, because there's the time to go and read them and get the data back, we want to make sure we make accurate and timely decisions. So the limit of 5 is really about the data rate that is provided from the Fronius and the ABB units. So that's where the limit comes from.
Thank you, Ivan. Another question from over the ditch. Can we mix and match different size inverters? So if you've got, say, all Fronius on a phase, then they can be an 8.2 and a 6. We don't care. We can be all the same as long as they're all Fronius or all ABB. We don't mind at all. Josh Shepherd, I noticed, has asked the question there. I think that might be one we should take off. It's quite a complex question, I think, and perhaps that might be best taken offline later on, where Josh is talking about some pretty, as Josh likes to do, some pretty funky thoughts. I think that might be best to take offline. Ive? We are just a bit over time now. Maybe Andrew's question, what sort of distance? Are you meaning of the actual communications, Andrew? Is that what you're suggesting there? Waiting for an answer from Andrew there. What sort of distance between inverters? Okay. So I'm not sure that's Andrew's because that's an anonymous attendee. It's good if you put your name to it. It's nice to see who we're talking to. But we'll answer that based then on perhaps the communications and also between inverters. Art, do you want to take that answer, please?
So there's a couple of things. So there are two. I'll answer it as two questions. What distances do we support between inverters? So if we're talking SP Pro inverters in a Powerchain system, that's really determined by the fact that they've got to be within the same area to connect to the same battery bank. So it's not really a matter of comms, it's a matter of you've got to physically have them all connected to the battery bank. So that distance is really down to, what is practicable and reasonable so that you don't have very long DC current runs between inverters. If we're talking about distance between the SP Pros and the managed AC coupled, the RS485 communications that runs between those goes up to 100 metres for RS485 connection. So that would be for all ABBs, that would be the maximum distance there. If we're talking Fronius, that then is the distance to the first manager. Subsequent Fronius units talk via their SolarNet connection, and those cut that distances up to the specifications of the SolarNet link.
All right, and again, Kerry from across the ditch. G'day, Kerry. Hope you're well. Mentioned that we can have a Fronius and Select Sun on a multiple three-phase system. So what was happening there is that from the phase manager can only manage one type of inverter. So we had L1's phase manager talking to some Fronius, and we had L2's phase manager talking to Fronius, and then L3 was talking to Select Sun. So the manager on that phase can only manage one language, if you like. If it's a single phase, then they have to be one or the other. You can't have a Fronius and an ABB on a single phase situation.
Yep. And so Don Anderson from the West has come in with the Fronius Primos. Yes, they have always been the slowest to respond to our commands, and it's just through their internal system. There's no particular problem with those units. So when you have 5 of them, we actually there's a sneaky way where we can actually get the data from all 5 much faster. They have a parameter which they internally collate, which is the total system power. So whilst it's slow to get that across from all of the individuals, the total system power, when we've got 5, comes across at a reasonable rate. So there's no problem with 5 on that system.
I think we'll have to wrap it up. There's obviously a bit of an appetite for lots of questions, which we have certainly been talking about that. And this is the beginning of a whole heap of, let's say, online type of training or questions and answers. But we do want to try and be a little bit different from just you sitting in front of looking at screen after screen after screen. So we're throwing around a number of ideas. What we'd really like to know is what suits you, what works best for you. We see that the day of perhaps us flying around the countryside and talking to you guys, where you have to sometimes travel 2, 3, 5 hours to come to training, spend a day, maybe stay overnight because it's a bit far. I think those days are gone from a training point of view, and we want to use this medium. But we want to try and make it as entertaining as possible so that it's educational, entertaining, all those sorts of things. So please give us your feedback on what you thought of today. We'd really love to hear that. You can either email that to us, text it to me if you've got my number, or if you don't already know about the installers Facebook page, please make me aware of yourself on that, and I can invite you into that, and then you can share some thoughts there. So we'd really love to hear what your thoughts are. Today we thought this timing would be quite good. It helps some of the other states, New Zealand, as I said, and perhaps also...
New Zealand's not a state, it's another country.
Oh, it should be a state. We love our New Zealand friends.
We
They should
do.
be a state. So let us know what you're thinking. We'd love to hear that. So really appreciate all the questions you put in today. Thank you, Ivan, for your technical input as usual. And we would love to hear your feedback. Thanks for listening, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your day. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.